Welcome to the VetMed Wellness and Leadership Podcast, where we discuss central challenges VetMed leaders face, such as burnout, stress, and difficult interactions with clients and staff, just to name a few. In each episode, you will hear about actionable solutions that you can apply to your practice and invitations to connect with fellow leaders who are passionate about improving the wellness of the VetMed profession. By subscribing, liking, commenting, or sharing this podcast, you are helping more veterinary professionals find the resources shared in these episodes. Thank you in advance for listening and supporting this show. I hope you enjoy it.
Hey everybody, Crystal Stokes here, and joining me today is Dr. Natalie Fayman. After a 33-year-long career as a veterinarian, Dr. Natalie transitioned into becoming an IPEX-certified professional coach and then fell in love with positive intelligence. Her mission is to help stressed-out veterinarians stop dreading their jobs and start loving their lives again. She's determined to leave the VetMed profession a happier place than she found it and loves teaching exhausted overgivers how to meet life's challenges with confidence, resilience, and positivity. And today, we are going to talk about stress, resilience, and VetMed, which is such an important topic. But before we dive into that, we are going to start with my favorite icebreaker, which is hearing Dr. Natalie's full circle story. So Dr. Natalie, thanks for being on with us today.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Of course. So please do, just tell us your story.
Yeah, absolutely. So just like you said, 33 years, the first 24 of those years were in ER and critical care. So nights, weekends, holidays, shifts that were anywhere from 15 to 24 hours long, never sleeping in my bed, never seeing my family, being stressed out all the time, and just thinking that I was the one superhero on earth who didn't need to sleep and didn't need to take care of myself and had endless energy and could do it all. And, most of us can keep that up for a little while when we're in our 20s, but that ship sailed a long time ago. And I just found myself getting progressively more exhausted, just being constantly stressed out all the time. All my relationships just kind of evaporated because I was never there. And I was always too exhausted to engage when I was. And I had developed this lifelong habit of kind of compensating for my emotional pain with food. So I would feed myself to distract myself from the loneliness, from the stress. I would eat for energy. I would eat if I was angry. I didn't need a reason. I would just eat 24/7. And so my weight crept up. And like most people, I tried all the diets, tried all the workout programs, and I could white knuckle my way through it for a little while. But after a month or two, it just got to be too hard and I would backslide. And then one day, just randomly, I just kind of stumbled across a weight loss group that was led by a life coach. Completely different approach than I had ever seen before. There was no good food or bad food. There was no, you can have this many calories a day. It was all about mindset. Why are you eating? Not what are you eating, but why are you eating? What emotion are you trying to address or solve with the food that you're putting in your mouth? Why are you stuffing yourself? Because you have no self-esteem, because you have this sense that you're unlovable or that you're just not good enough, whatever all the reasons are. It was so many light bulbs for me. It was just a completely novel experience. And I thought that I had joined that group to lose weight, and I did. But more importantly, I became a calmer person, a less stressed out person, happier, more optimistic about my future. All my relationships got better. It was such a profound transformation that I just looked at the rest of my life that was still in front of me, and I couldn't see a better way for me to spend the rest of my life than to bringing that kind of transformation to other people. And I had kind of, like most people in veterinary medicine, I had just gotten to the point where the stress and the physical, emotional, mental demands were just becoming unsustainable. I literally, after one of those horrendous shifts, I was standing up outside on the front sidewalk in full daylight, talking to somebody, and I fell asleep. I completely blacked out for just a microsecond, but it scared the crap out of me. And I was having trouble keeping my car in a straight line on the road anymore. And I just realized, if I keep pushing myself to keep doing this, I'm going to die. I have to do something different. And so, transition to daytime medicine, it was a little bit better, but it was really just smaller doses of the same thing. And then when COVID hit and all of the things that I love to do with my time kind of evaporated and went away, I just took the opportunity to find a really good, reputable coach training program that really just cemented like all of the thought work that I had learned to do in the weight loss group with the weight loss coach. And then I found positive intelligence, and it was just like the horizons just opened up for me. All of a sudden, I understood why I was such an overgiver, why I put other people's priorities in front of my own and sacrifice everything that I want so that everybody else can have what they want, why I feel like I'm not entitled to make mistakes, although I can forgive other people for theirs. And the deeper I go into this work, the more it's just like an epiphany. And I honestly consider it a privilege to be able to bring that to as many people as I possibly can. So that's how I got here.
It's a beautiful story. And I think the resonance of the things you've experienced and listeners that are perhaps in that position right now, right? Experiencing exhaustion, using coping strategies they know might temporarily work, but in the long run are hurting them. We've all been there in some shape, form, or fashion, myself included. So I appreciate your vulnerability today and just sharing your journey. And I love how so many people that have been on this podcast have a similar story of they received some sort of help that was so mind-blowing to them that it forced them on the journey of actually learning how to do that, whether it was coaching or some other modality. So the proof is in the pudding with that. Very, very cool story.
Yeah. We change when we don't have a choice, right?
Sometimes that is the case. Yes. Yeah. Well, so we are talking about stress resilience today, and this is on the top of everybody's mind because we know that vet med is stressful, and that's not going away. That's just a part of working in medicine, period, dealing with life or death, dealing with clients as well as patients. It's complex. There's not much margin for error, so it's a stressful environment. So learning resiliency skills is really, really important. And today we are going to kind of talk through different situations and common things that happen within practices that cause stress and how to work with them. So we're going to start with one of the things I hear about most often as a stress trigger, which would be unhappy clients. I'll pass the mic over to you.
Yes. Coaching has really taught me a lot of valuable skills that I apply to managing conflict with unhappy clients. And apparently I have become so good at it that I am now the default person that everybody sends their unhappy clients to talk to, regardless of what doctor or what team member was involved in the conflict. I get to be the one that talks to all of them, which, it would be easy to be resentful about that if I didn't kind of take a step back and just, make myself remember that it is because I have these skills. And it really just comes down to listening to the client and acknowledging when somebody is angry, most of the time it is because they feel like they haven't been heard. And when you're on the other side of that, it's very easy to become defensive and to go into self-protection mode. So you're not actually trying to empathize and understand with the client's perspective. You're trying to protect yourself or your workplace or your colleagues or whatever the case is. But just being listened to and not argued with and not trying to, talk people out of their perception, right or wrong, whether what they're complaining about is what actually happened or not. When you try to talk somebody out of their feelings, they just get even more entrenched and they get very defensive. When they are in that self-defense mode, they cannot hear anything that you say to them. So really, you have to get them to a point where they are finally satisfied that you've heard them, that you've understood them. And so what's worked for me is to just approach these interactions. I'm not trying to defend myself. I'm trying to understand what you're saying to me. I'm trying to put myself in your shoes and really just experience what I would have felt if this had happened to me, and to acknowledge them, to validate that they're not wrong, that they are entitled to their feelings. And what I look for is that sigh when they just let all that tension go out of their body because they're finally satisfied that somebody has paid attention to what they're saying and somebody understands them. When you see that sigh and you see them relax, now is your opportunity to communicate what you want to tell them, because now they can finally allow your words to penetrate. They're able to listen to you where they weren't before. If they're still tense and keyed up, you're talking to a wall, and all they care about is just defending themselves. So this is something I learned in coach training. The skill of acknowledge and validate is completely life-changing because so few people get to experience that. When you and I are having a conflict, the first thing I do is I acknowledge I can completely understand why you would feel that way. I would feel that way in your position, and don't make them wrong. So once people understand that you're not fighting with them, that you understand that you're hearing them, that's when they relax. And that's your opportunity to have a conversation, and not before.
Love it. So if I recap this for anyone listening that says, I would raise my hand and say, working with unhappy clients is really, really stressful for me. I'd hate letting people down. I really dislike seeing people feeling unhappy. And your recommendation would be take a step back and shift into the gear of really listening and really seeking to understand. Even if my brain is saying, I completely disagree. In fact, I know I'm right because I know medicine or whatever it may be. Set that aside, set being right aside, set defending myself aside, and just listen and let that person know, I really just want to understand your position 100%. And then from that common understanding, we can then move forward. And that might be, once I see them relax, that physical sigh or signs that they are finally at ease, that's my opportunity to then say, now would it be okay if I explain to you X, Y, or Z? But you can't move forward before then. So if you're working with unhappy clients, you really have to help them relax and be on the same page first.
Exactly. The other thing I would love to communicate is that any type of conflict is actually an opportunity to create a deeper bond of trust with that person. Citing the example, I don't know where I heard this, but there was actually a study done with customer satisfaction in restaurants. And no matter how white glove the service was, no matter how pleasant the experience was, they actually got fewer reports of like 5-star customer satisfaction compared to when something went wrong and they went over, above, and beyond to make it right. People actually pay more attention to how you handle mistakes and what you do to make it right than they do if nothing had ever gone wrong in the first place. That actually creates a deeper bond of trust and might actually get you a more long-term relationship with somebody who could turn out to be a really good client.
Well, I wonder, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I wonder if we could kind of blend this together with conflict in general, because I know we were going to also talk about workplace conflict. And I would say that I think as veterinary professionals really do struggle with conflict in general. So whether it's I have an unhappy client or I have an unhappy team member, but how about if we kind of roll those together, and how can we boost our stress resilience and work with the stress of conflict to have just more resilience while we are in VetMed, knowing that conflict is going to be a natural part of the workplace environment. Yeah. So part one, you already said, was framing conflict as an opportunity to build more trust.
Right. Exactly. The thing that has really been helpful to me is to, again, detach myself from that initial knee-jerk reaction to defend myself and to be right, and to try to put myself into the other person's head and to understand what is their perspective. Something actually happened at work just a couple weeks ago where I made a comment to one of the head technicians about how, it's really frustrating because there's just a lack of initiative for some of the employees to improve and to keep learning. There's really no expectation of improvement once people reach kind of like a certain level of minimum proficiency. And so this got back to the manager, whose immediate reaction was to deflect and deny and just, everything's fine. And it would have been really easy for me to get defensive over that, to get resentful at her denial, because from my perspective, it is very true. And I would love to be a part of actually solving that problem. But her reaction of just digging in her heels, this is what happens when people feel like they're being attacked. They entrench, they defend, they don't want to hear anything that you have to say. And putting myself in her position, I realize now, she's defending herself because she feels threatened. Somehow she has heard this as she's not doing her job. And so her position may be under threat. And her way of defending that is by avoiding it and by shifting the responsibility away from herself. So as frustrating as that can be, I understand that that's a fear response. And so that actually helps me to have empathy for her So we don't end up fighting against each other. I can position myself as being an ally. I can help you with this rather than, no, you're wrong, you have to see it my way, which that never gets anybody anywhere.
Mm-hmm. I love it. So in marriage and family therapy and as a therapist, one of the things that we're really big on is that the strongest relationships are not the ones that are conflict-free. In fact, those are very fragile and artificial. The strongest relationships are those where we have learned to repair conflict and we do it quickly and effectively. So knowing that Natalie and I, we could have a conflict between ourselves, but we know we're going to get through it. We know we're going to talk it through. We're going to find some alignment. We're going to figure out what we need to do to maintain our relationship despite the conflict. So I think that creates a really strong bond when you know you have a history of getting through conflict together.
100%. And you're right on the money. When you have conflict with someone and it's resolved to the benefit of both people, that leads to a deeper understanding and a much tighter connection. So the strongest relationships are the ones that have conflict. I don't even think it's possible to have a relationship with no conflict unless, just like you said, one person's just denying or giving the other person everything they want, even though they're secretly probably feeling a lot of resentment.
I was even thinking I have a conflict with my cat. Like last night, he says, I'm going to sleep on the pillow. And I'm like, no, I'm going to sleep on the pillow. And we compromised by him sleeping on my head like a little mound, which is very...
Well, that's a win-win.
He loved it. Oh, and now we have a stronger relationship. I digress. But so this is something you mentioned just a second ago when you were talking about the different stances to take in conflict. And there was that flavor of, I'm right, and having to step back from that. So that's another aspect that we had discussed earlier about stress and stress resilience, is really working with this edge of feeling like you have to do everything yourself to make sure it's done right. Say more about that. Who's listening to this podcast relates to that?
Oh my God.
Perfectionists unite, right? Like that's a very common feeling of medicine. It demands a certain degree of correctness. We do not want to make errors. And so there's a lot of fear of letting go of that control and something wrong.
Right.
So I'd love for you to speak to that because it's so pervasive.
Absolutely. I've lived most of my life this way. I refer to myself as a recovering control freak because the justification I always gave myself was I need to make sure that nobody makes a mistake. I need to make sure that this animal in front of me receives the absolute best care that I can give it, the care that I would want my own animal to have. And because sometimes you're surrounded with people whose knowledge or skills may not quite be where you would want them to be, then I feel like I have to watch every move they make. I have to ask, hey, did you do this? Hey, did you do that? I have to hover and look over their shoulder. And that is exhausting. It's exhausting to do it 5 minutes, much less the whole day. And even more than that, it becomes a life sentence because once I start doing that, hovering and controlling and nagging and second guessing and just micromanaging everybody, what are people's reaction to that? They're going to step back and say, hey, go ahead. You all yours, go for it. And so now it becomes my job to do everything myself because I don't trust anyone else. And I'm communicating to everybody else that I don't trust you. I don't trust your skills. I don't trust your judgment. That is going to kill any kind of initiative, any kind of motivation, any kind of expression of creativity, out of the box thinking. All that gets shut down when you are controlling and micromanaging people. And it is painful to step back and watch people struggle and fumble and make mistakes. But when you think about it, this is how we learn. This is how we learn how to walk, by falling down and getting up over and over again. Can't tell you how many times I fell off my bicycle when I was a kid, but I kept getting right back on. If we don't make mistakes, we don't learn anything. And granted, some of those mistakes have really significant consequences in veterinary medicine. But the way I've reframed it for myself is that it's not my job to do everything right. It's my job to teach everyone else to be able to do this in the eventual situation where I may not be here anymore. Suppose I die in a car wreck 6 months from now. I need these people to be able to carry on without me and to do a good job and hopefully to be inspired by the things that I was able to teach them and not have resentment over all the times I stepped in and said, no, you're doing it wrong. You have to do it this way. Mm-hmm. So just teaching.
Right. Sorry. I'm wondering, did you ever have any experiences of when you were on the receiving end, like when you were a veterinary student or your first few years in veterinary medicine, what was it like for you, both sides? One, when you had someone who was kind of micromanaging you and not allowing you to grow, for you, when you had the opposite experience of someone who was allowing you to step in and have more autonomy. How did it feel?
It was a little, well, when I was a vet student, I definitely felt like I was under the microscope all the time, which I guess is understandable when you're still a student. But my situation was a little bit different. As soon as I graduated from veterinary school, I went right into the ER, working by myself every night. Probably not the brightest decision I ever made, but it was incredibly stressful. I literally didn't sleep for 3 years because I was up reading and studying all night. But, in those situations where I do feel controlled or micromanaged or questioned, my exact reaction is to step back and say, okay, you do it, or you show me. And it really just kind of illustrates, it goes both directions. I realize on a very deep level now that when I'm trying to micromanage or control or second guess other people, it shuts down their initiative. It shuts down my ability to trust them to do anything, because they're just going to back off and it's going to be my job for the rest of my life, because that's how I react when somebody does it to me. So I really just try, again, to put myself in the shoes of the other person. What is it that they're afraid of? And how can I help them with that? How can I become their ally instead of their adversary? And not to take it personally. Most of the time when you have a conflict with somebody, it's not anything to do with you. It's about what they're afraid of and what they're trying to avoid and how they think it's reflecting on them. So they're worried about themselves. They're not actually worried about what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Good point. I'm also imagining, if I were in a position of, let's say I have staff that I'm working with, and I would love to delegate more, but I have fear inside. Like, I really am having a hard time getting over the hump. I would advise trying to have a sit-down conversation with my staff to say, we're so busy all the time, right? In clinic, it's just rush, rush, rush. There's never a minute to really sit down and have these important conversations, but call a 20-minute team meeting and start talking through, like, what would it look like if I were to delegate out some of these tasks? Here are the standards that I would require. Where do you all feel like you might need extra training or support to get up to that level of proficiency? How can we have safety measures in place, like little floaty wings when you're in the pool while you're learning these new skills? How can we have a regular check-in so we can have honest conversation about how you're progressing as I'm taking my hand off the wheel and giving you more autonomy, that you feel like you're growing? So I think that letting team members know that this isn't something that just happens magically, that it does require having a conversation, but it also builds more resilience within the team. Like, you all will feel more connected, more trust in each other. I just want to advocate for taking Dr. Natalie's advice and really looking into yourself and asking, oh gosh, am I struggling with trying to take everything on myself? And if so, how could you open that up to the team as a conversation to start building more trust and autonomy?
Absolutely. And I'm glad you're bringing that up. In positive intelligence, there's this concept of mutual accountability, which means that it's not the boss's job or the person making all the decisions. It's not their job to hold everybody else accountable, because that's too much work for anybody, especially if you're working with a decent sized team of people. But when everybody has the same vision, when everybody cares about the same thing, then they are emotionally invested enough in the work that when they see somebody doing something that may be below standards, they're not going to wait for the boss to come and fix it. They're going to call that person out right then and there and help them to learn or to improve their skill. So everybody becomes part of the team, and everybody's responsible for making sure that the quality standards are held up.
It sounds wonderful. I want to work there. That sounds great. Well, now here's another really big one. I think it goes both ways, which is taking stress home with us from the workplace, stress back to the workplace. It can go either way. And that's a huge source of stress, right? Imagine being home with kids that are sick and it's just like a miserable night. I didn't sleep at all. There's to come into work and it's like, oh my gosh, I feel like crap. I need 20 cups of coffee just to get through the day. Or I'm at work and I just had the worst client interaction, or maybe a procedure went wrong and I just feel so horrible. And I go home and the kids are running around. They want attention. I'm like, yeah. So I can see this playing out in so many ways. and how stressful that is. So I get stressed just thinking about it. Boom. Tell us, what are your recommendations for dealing with the stress back and forth between home and work?
That is so important. It's a learned skill, to be very honest with you, because for one thing, 90% of human communication is nonverbal. So when we're carrying something, we had a fight with our spouse and we have to go to work, and we think that we're not projecting that on the people around us. We can't hide that. It's coming out whether we think it is or not. And other people don't understand what it is that's going on. They just know that they're getting some kind of standoffish vibe or some kind of tension. And so they're going to go into self-protection mode. They're going to want to stay away from you, or they're going to come back at you because, they perceived something from you that triggered them. So then they're going to attack or defend themselves. And then we end up triggering each other. And isn't it amazing how if I have a bad day at home, I probably am going to have a bad day at work too, because we project this energy and we don't even realize it. So number one skill that I would recommend for people, and again, this is a skill and it has to be learned and it has to be practiced, present moment awareness, because so much of our stress comes from our mind being in the future or our mind being in the past, where we're dwelling on that fight that we had with our spouse this morning, rolling it over in our brain over and over again, marinating in it. I should have said this. How dare he? Whatever the story
I never do that.
No. But then, the other half of that is being stuck in the future, worried about, oh my God, I have to work with this person that I always feel like they're bullying me or they're sabotaging me or whatever. Living in that future scenario that we're worried about, even though it's not actually happening in that moment. It really just all comes down to whatever it is that's happening in front of you right then and there, and the rest of the world doesn't exist, because whatever it is that's stressing you out is probably not the thing that you are engaged with in that moment. But while your brain is stuck in what happened an hour ago or what's going to happen later today, that is going to contaminate the interactions that you have in that moment. And so I guess it kind of comes down to compartmentalizing the experience that you're having. It really does take practice. But the better I get at it, the more I find that my stress level has come way down, because really what it comes down to, if there's 24 hours in the day and you're going to be stressed out for maybe like a total of 3 or 4 of those hours versus I'm going to be stressed out for 24 of those hours because I'm festering and marinating and ruminating and replaying all this stuff in my brain, it's unrealistic to say I'm never going to have another conflict. I'm never going to get stressed out again. But it's going to happen. It's up to me how much of that I'm going to carry around with me and how long I'm going to draw it out.
It's so powerful. And actually, for those that are listening to this on audio only, the video portion of this, Dr. Natalie has this beautiful background of, it's just like a water, beach and sunset. It looks like a sunset. And what it reminds me of is, as therapists, when we're trying to train this skill, because it's very challenging. Most of us have been habitually practicing being in the future or present our whole life. So just notice your thinking. You'll probably find, oh, I'm thinking about the future and all the things I have to do, and I'm feeling kind of anxious about it, or maybe somewhat excited, but I'm checking off boxes of what I have to do next, or I'm ruminating on the past, either remembering something maybe that was pleasant, like a good memory, or replaying something that wasn't so pleasant and feeling stressed about it, dwelling on it. We don't spend much time simply being in the present moment. It can be very, very hard. So I'm looking at this sunset, and it makes me think about one of the strategies I really like is using my 5 senses. So let's say I'm driving into work and I notice I'm just lost in thought. I am predicting what work is going to hold for me. I'm thinking back to what just happened before I left the house. I'll just stop and say, wait, look at the sunrise in front of me. It is beautiful. Feel the steering wheel in my hand, grip it, push my foot on the gas pedal because I love going. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's true. I love going fast. Bring myself into the present moment, feel myself breathing. All of those things can be a simple strategy for those of you who might be struggling with, like, how the hell do I get into the present moment? Try using your senses and just noticing what's around you. I even name it in my brain. Like, I'll think sunrise. Yeah. Steering wheel. Got it. And that's like, now I'm here in the moment. And it is a muscle that may be very atrophied. Like Dr. Natalie said, if you have not been practicing this, it will be very hard at first. This is where stuff like positive intelligence, the coaching that Dr. Natalie does, that's teaching and training on how to develop that muscle. We'll table that for another time. Actually, it kind of segues nicely into the next part we were going to talk about, which is around like priming your body for maximum stress resilience. So let's slide into that.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I mean, it's like you don't put junk fuel in your car because it's going to stall and it's going to die. Your car needs a certain amount of air and good quality gasoline. It needs everything to be tuned up or it's going to fall apart. And our bodies are the same way. And I lived in denial about this for probably a good 25, 30 years. I didn't need to sleep. I didn't need to rest. But my body reminded me that, yes, indeed, you do, or you're going to die. You need to nourish your body. You need to give it the tools that it needs in order to be able to handle the stress that you're heaping on top of it. And first and foremost, that means feed yourself quality food. Don't live on the drive-through. Make sure that you're eating at least some whole food eat plants, as many plants as you can, because we can't just take a pill and get the same kind of nutrient boost that we can get from eating whole, healthy food. So, and just as an aside, we all probably know this already, but the supplement industry is completely unregulated. They can do whatever they want. Mm-hmm. Most of the supplements that we buy over the counter are contaminated with pesticides and heavy metals, and they don't even contain the ingredients that are stated on the label. So you are far better off getting your nutrition from real food than buying a protein powder or a nutrient supplement. So feed your body. Also, water, not energy drinks. We cannot live without water. Those chemical reactions that happen inside of our body cannot happen without adequate water. And if you think for a minute, what are the symptoms of dehydration? Even a tiny bit of dehydration impairs your recovery. It elevates your cortisol, which nobody needs. It impairs your brain function, interferes with memory recall, and it just flat out makes you cranky and it gives you headaches. So hydration is definitely one of the top things that we probably all neglect, especially me, because if I'm stuck in surgery, I do these monster full mouth dental extractions. I mean, they take 4 hours plus. I can't be sitting there for 4 hours and have to get up and go to the bathroom every hour, but I have to find ways to make sure that I take in adequate hydration, maybe during different times of the day. So dehydration definitely to be avoided. And if for no other reason than it just creates more cortisol, which is that's that physiologic stress reaction that causes the long-term deterioration of our bodies and our brain. Sleep. We all short ourselves on sleep, and I'm just as guilty of this as everybody else, but we need at least 7 hours a night, because even one night of sleep deprivation can actually impair your immune function. It interferes with your body's ability to heal. It interferes with your body's ability to deal with stress and to recover from stress. In fact, sleep deprivation elevates your cortisol. So a little bit of dehydration, a little bit of crappy food, some sleep deprivation, and you are just as stressed as if you spent a full day getting yelled at by your boss. So, and if you have a physical impairment, like your partner snores or you have sleep apnea, it is definitely worth getting that taken care of. So, do what you can as far as your nighttime routine. That you've probably heard this before, but no screens for at least an hour before you go to bed, because that blue light will interfere with your brain's ability to kind of settle down and get into a rest and recovery mode. And just make sure that you're in a dark environment, that it's as quiet as possible. The temperature of your bedroom, I think 68 degrees is the recommended. We sleep better and more restfully and better rejuvenation when the environment is cold. So just put some extra blankets on the bed. But sleep is actually not enough by itself. We need play. Our brains need to have just purposeless enjoyment. You can't make up for that with sleep either. You can't be working or sleeping all the time, or your brain is just going to shift into that constant survival mode. So we have to actually have some enjoyment, some fun in our lives. We have to have something to look forward to. And we're all so busy and so overworked. But when I say this, everybody's knee-jerk reaction is, well, I don't have time. Yeah, but the quality of the time is so much more important than the quantity of the time. Because if you spend 10 minutes with your child, fully present, fully focused on them, 100% engaged, that is going to have more of a positive impact than spending a half a day with them while you're answering emails and responding to notifications on your phone and dealing with work emergencies when you're not at work. You're not really there. And so focus on the quality more than the quantity.
Mm-hmm. What's your favorite way to play?
Oh my gosh. Well, I, about 7 years ago, discovered taiko drumming, which is a Japanese art form involving drums. Is very visceral. It goes right to my heart, right to my chest. And it is so empowering. It's phenomenal. It's a physical workout. It's an emotional workout. And it's challenging. It's very difficult, more so than what people might realize. But I love a challenge. I love learning things that take a lot of effort, that take, the development of some skill. So taiko has become a very big part of my life. I have been performing with a Japanese taiko drum group for the last 6 years, 5 or 6 years. And just every time I get up on stage, it's just like I'm in a whole different world. And let me tell you about present moment awareness. When you're on a stage with a bunch of people looking up at you, it's really hard to remember what was stressing you out yesterday. You're in that moment. And it really shows. I mean, when at the end of a performance, when it's over and done with and we're packing up, I can't describe the incredible feeling that I'm experiencing just from having been fully engaged in that moment. And I'm also a martial artist. So martial arts does the same thing for me. I go to the dojo. If there's some giant guy swinging a punch at my head, it's really hard for me to think about what I'm planning for dinner tonight or the argument that I had with somebody a week ago or some snarky thing that a client said to me. I got to deal with that punch right then and there or bad things are going to happen. So for years, I didn't really connect that every time when I go to the dojo or when I go to taiko class, I'm usually tense and stressed out and kind of cranky and exhausted when I get there. When I leave, I'm flying in the clouds. I feel amazing. And I never really connected that it's at least a part of that is just that extreme present moment awareness that I have not been thinking about anything else but this. And I have been enjoying it fully the entire time that I've been there.
Wow. I so relate to that. I think for me personally, a big part of my stress reduction would be playing tennis, just sports, stuff that it's so consuming that there's no other way to be than to be in that moment and just be in it. And I love the physical release of energy. I tend to be very antsy. And if I sit all day, and just it kind of contributes to that stressed out feeling in my body. And I think performing too, like anything with music and the arts has been so cathartic. You hear about that all the time. I think it's such a nice pathway for people to just decrease stress and really feel more alive. I wanted to shift into our last point today. I think this one's really a challenging one, which is around saying yes or no and how to really know if you're making the right call. Like there's that, many people in veterinary medicine will say, yeah, people pleaser. And that was something you mentioned in your bio, that working with people pleasers is something you're really passionate about as a people pleaser yourself. So let's talk about that yes and no and how it relates to stress resilience.
100%. When somebody asks you for something, and I'll just use the example of when I was in the ER, if somebody would ask me, hey, can you pick up this shift for me? I want to go out and celebrate something with my husband. I was a pleaser. I was telling myself a story about, the day might come when I need a day off and they're going to be the only person I can ask. So I got to make sure I keep them happy. And the other thing was, I don't have kids and I don't have an attachment or whatever. So I can do it. So I don't really have a reason to say no other than I just didn't really want to. So, but I would say yes, because pleaser, I always put everybody else's needs in front of mine. But then what would happen is that I would show up with resentment because I'm thinking about all the things that I wish I was doing with my day other than being here at work. And that resentment was instantly contaminating everybody around me. They, of course, the people I'm working with, they don't know what my problem is. All they know is, Fayman's grouchy again, stay away, or don't do anything to piss her off, hide around the corner. So it was really not a service to anybody for me to say yes if I said it with any kind of hidden resentment. So the rule that I have started using for myself, and that I would recommend to anybody, is that if you say yes, do it wholeheartedly. If you are feeling any kind of hidden resentment, and you don't have to justify, the same example, just because I didn't have kids or I didn't have an attachment, didn't mean that my personal time was any less valuable to me than it was for somebody that had kids and a husband. I need my recovery time just as much as anybody else. So if I can say yes and show up engaged and willing and pleasant and happy to be there, then it's a good yes. If I say yes, but I'm telling myself a story about how can they ask me for this? I'm so tired. Can't they see that I've been working 90 hours, and you can't expect other people to know what's going on in your head. So if you say yes with resentment, it should be a no. And that no is actually a gift, because when you say no, you're able to preserve the positive feelings that you have for that person or the positive attitude that you bring with you to work. And that is the real gift right there. So if your yes is going to destroy that positive attitude, then it should be a no.
I think that's a nice instruction. I feel like it's fairly clear, and that's a way a person can check in with themselves and just say, do I have resentment attached to this or not? And explore that. Like, what happens if you say no, and then test it out, see how it feels. These are all experimental, and so many of us find our way with navigating our boundaries and what we say yes and no to through experimentation. So if your current way isn't working so great, you find you might be erring on the side of too many yeses, then listen and just see what happens. You can always go back to being a pleaser, right? It's not like that will ever leave. So I really appreciate your perspective on that as someone who really has struggled with it.
Yeah,
you have shared like a tremendous amount of very, I think, timely information today with where veterinary medicine currently is. For those people listening that are just so busy and they are only going to have a limited amount of brain space to store information today, if they can only remember two things from this podcast, what do you hope they take away?
Well, number one, I would like to make sure that everybody understands, if you expect to have longevity in the veterinary profession, if you want to avoid burning out and having to leave the profession, you are obligated to take care of yourself, both mentally and physically. We can't burn the candle at both ends forever. It has consequences and it catches up. So setting personal boundaries around your self-care it's mandatory. You have to, if you want to be in this profession for 30, 40 years or however long you plan to be here. You got to put the oxygen mask on yourself, and you don't have to apologize for it, and you don't have to give reasons for it. So that's first and foremost. The other thing is that really the one thing that I believe controls our experience of our lives more than anything else is the way that we talk to ourselves inside our own heads. And if your narrative is, well, I have to make everybody else happy, or I'm not really worth taking time off or saying no to somebody because I don't deserve it. I have to earn my value by working like a slave or saving everybody or picking up all these extra shifts, taking the slack off of everybody else, whatever the reason is. Talk to yourself as if you love yourself unconditionally, because the difference between conditional love and unconditional love is something I think a lot of people don't understand. A lot of us, we only give ourselves permission to feel good about ourselves, to feel proud of ourselves when we've done something to earn it. You don't have to earn the love that you give yourself. And if you need to take some time, if you need to say no, if you need to put boundaries around what you're willing to accept from other people or what you're willing to give other people in order to preserve that positive presence and your energy that needs to sustain you for the rest of your life, you don't have to earn that you were born worthy of that, and claim it.
Beautifully said.
Thank you.
As a person who has been on the merry-go-round and been on all sides of this. I hope that people listening today can really feel that resonance and start to explore this, talk to people about it, reach out. And, Natalie is a great resource. I would love for you to share where people can find you if they'd like to continue that conversation.
Yes, thank you. Absolutely. So my website is nolimitscoachingnow.com. And I have a whole library of self-development videos. I have all kinds of resources there, a bunch of podcasts, but more importantly, there are areas that you can go to learn more about the stress resilience, whether it's just for yourself or if your whole team at work needs to figure out a way to be together and to stop butting heads. There's an individuals page and a work teams page. So whichever one is most relevant for you, I would invite you. There's also a little hidden stress quiz you can take to see if you're carrying around any of these little festering resentments for things that you may not even remember anymore, but those emotions still persist. So there's all kinds of fun stuff on there. So nolimitscoachingnow.com.
Great. We will link all that up in the show notes. And who doesn't like a good quiz? We are all dying.
Exactly.
Well, Dr. Natalie, thank you so much for being on with us today. It was really, really a blast.
Thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you for joining me today. I hope that you feel stoked after listening to this episode. And as always, I would love to hear your comments and feedback. Is there a topic that you want to know more about? Please let me know. And thank you again for subscribing and sharing your favorite episodes with others. It really means a lot.